Hostages released. That's good news. We're doing the book of Job tonight. First one. Should be good. Am I even in the right place? I am. Look, it's David. Hey, David. Good evening, family. I hope everyone had a great day. I look forward to studying Job with y'all. I love you all. Signed, sincerely, David. That's how I interpreted it, at least. Because everything you do is sincere. So I hope you don't mind that I creatively interjected there. Pure blood. Is that Latin? I'm uncultured. Looks Latin-y to me. Let me get Discord up. Either way, good to see you. Hey, Tampa. Discord is up for the voice stuffs. There she is. We are going to read this little introduction here, and then I do just want to blast right into it, because I figure we can just stop as we go and kind of talk about some of the theological stuff. And then I also figured that at the end, we can, I guess we'll see. But maybe do a final one where we just break down purely theological aspects of Job. Because for me, that's the biggest thing. The other most common, and that's pretty common, that's something where I don't feel I'm in the minority with, where Job is highly theological. The other more common overall general interpretive style is that it's just poetry to teach a lesson that will become obvious as we read it. Which could very well be true. And I agree with on a lot of fronts. Praise be to God alone. So is it Latin though? It looks Latin. I know nothing about Latin. Very, very, very uncultured with Latin. You can throw a little bit of Greek and a tiny, tiny little bit of Hebrew, and I'll at least recognize it. Latin, best guess, is my best guess. It sounds Latin-y. Beautiful. Nailed it. Glad to hear it. Latin is very pretty. It's a very pretty language. And I feel it's making a comeback. With the Roman Catholics are making a pretty harsh comeback. So it seems as though I just posted a Joe pic in Pets on Discord. Oh, with the snake. Roman Catholicism is making a comeback, is what I was gonna say, which has been surprising to me, but in some ways not so much. Not so much surprising actually when you think about it. Who is? Uh-oh. Chanson on Discord. Who is that? I don't know that person. These box elder bugs are still all over our house. They just will not go away. They're making it through the entire winter. It's actually pretty impressive. All right, I'm going to read the intro that this translation gives, because it was decent. And despite of Satan, Job sinned not, nor for all these sufferings and temptations could Satan prevail with him, so far to forget himself towards God as to utter a misbelieving word against him. Yes, that is in this section, actually. We're reading 1, 2, and 3. The introduction from this translation, from this Bible, says, considered both a theological and literary masterpiece, the book of Job is an honest portrayal of God allowing a good man to suffer. The test of Job's faith, allowed by God in response to a challenge from Satan, revealed God's loving sovereignty and the supremacy of divine wisdom over human wisdom, personified by Job's friends, which really, really is. And it's almost painful to read when it comes to his friends. Believing that God is good despite the apparent evidence to the contrary, Job rested in faith alone. In the depths of agony, he could still proclaim, I know that my Redeemer lives. In the end, God silenced all discussion with the truth that he alone is wise, yet he vindicated Job's trust in him, providing that genuine faith cannot be destroyed. The unknown author was probably an Israelite, writing sometime between 1500 and 500 BC. And there is... Never mind. We'll come back to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Kat said, fun fact, in ancient cultures and some today still, royals would wear these snakes, good God, as live jewelry. They're actually called royal ball pythons because of it. That is a fact. Heidi, I remember Heidi. Heidi says, Shalom. Happy Sunday. First day of the week. I can relate to Job. Here's the thing, Heidi. I like you a lot, and I'm glad you're here. But I have a personal vendetta against the concept of Sunday being the first day of the week. I get why. I get it. Especially from a religious standpoint. I get it. But it just isn't in practice. In practice, Monday is the first day of the week. So for all my calendars, when it asks me, what is the first day of the week? It is Monday. Monday starts the week, baby girl. The week ends on Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm a heretic. We already know this. I didn't know that, Cat. Thanks, Snake Queen. Here we go. All right, chapter 1, verse 1. Job's character and wealth. Just fun fact reminder, in case you forgot, none of these scriptures, none of them at all, 0% of them, had chapters or titles. So just keeping that in mind. These are fun things that translations do that aren't even in unison. So depending on what Bible you have, the titles will be different. The verses, for the most part, are the same. The chapters are, for the most part, the same. But the titles are fun things that whoever produces the Bible gets to decide all by themselves. So for this one, it's Job's character and wealth, which is a valid title. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. The land of Uz, or Uz, the location, like many locations in the ancient Near East, don't know, not really. But they say that it is either near Edom, and the guess from that is pulled from Genesis 36, and a couple other verses, but I believe primarily Genesis 36. In the south of Aram, or in the north of Aram. So very generalized location, which is, we've learned already just in Genesis, that is very common. That man was blameless and upright. This is the first presentation of who Job is. This is the setting of the stage. If we think of it like a movie, it's called character development. So it's no different in literature, and it's no different in the Bible, because a lot of the time they're just stories. And not to say they're not real or anything, but they're still stories. We're being told a story. So this is the beginning of the character development of Job, and it's very, very important. It's deeply important because of the principle that later comes. So this is our first example of Job was a blameless man. He was upright. This is us presenting him as the ideal human. He was the best of the best, a man of integrity who loved and was devoted to God. The Hebrew term for upright is, Ghost can cut me off, but I think it's yeshar or yesher. It's a reference to something that is straight or level, literally. So in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, Isaiah 26 and Jeremiah 31, the same term is used to express something that is level. It is straight. So then it makes sense to describe a human that way as well, in a non-literal sense, but I guess also in the literal sense if you think about it. It indicates honesty and righteousness, known because the same term is used in Psalms and Proverbs to express those things. To be upright, to be yeshar, is to be obedient to God, to have your head on straight. And the same term is used in other contexts for a similar or the same purpose. Then it said, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Describes a reverent attitude of respect, obedience, and trust towards God. The indicators before make that relatively clear, so they're just driving it home. one who feared God. This is, I think we've had some arguments in the past about this concept of like fearing God. Well, we shouldn't be afraid of God. Well, maybe you should, but even if not, a lot of the times when it's expressed in the Old Testament is not like scary fear. It's the reverence. It's a deep respect and reverence of something that is so mighty or great. It's closely associated with the term wisdom in the Old Testament, which again we also know because in the poetic books the same term is often used in that context. So if we pull out this term or this descriptive term, fear God, and we just talk about that alone on its own with no context, you could have arguments. But if you pull it from somewhere like Proverbs or from Psalm, in context, the way it is, it's not a scary thing. It's like a deep reverence. It's a love. It's a respect. It's not like a, ooh, spooky ghost in the sky. Ruth. Nothing so absolutely governs the multitude as superstition. What is that from? Spinoza? I have something to look at later. Verse 2. Oh, we've made it so far already. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. This is interesting and important because of the numbers. So from other places, later in Job, there is an example of what a family is, the ideal family, if you will. And this is the ratio that is given. So it's setting up for that later. That's out of chapter 42 later. The number 7, obviously, even just going through Genesis and never having read anything else, we already have kind of a sense that the number 7 is significant in some sense. Normally it's expressed as it's the expression of completeness or being whole. And that was not just in the Hebrew world, that was outside of the Hebrew world, elsewhere as well. There was also a prominent number, and that would be 3. And so he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The same ratio then will apply in 1 second to the sheep and the camel. Whether this is literal, you could argue for days. When you get into 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, is it likely he had exactly these numbers of everything? Probably not. If he was real at all, if this was a literal story at all, is it likely he had that exact number? Probably not. So then it's a matter of drawing the line. Well, where is the line? What is literal? What is not? What is embellishment? What is not? What is just leveling things out so the story is easier to tell because they were passed down verbally for so long? Well, 7,000, 3,000, 500, and 500 is pretty easy to remember versus what the reality probably was were this literal. But he had 7 sons, 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, just like Cat wants. 500 female donkeys. And very many servants. The moral of the section is he's wealthy. That's what really matters from the section, in my opinion. Unless you're super into numerology, then whatever, I support it. I'm just not about it. It's not my jam. But this is an expression of the man is very well off. So we're still developing Job as a character. He's upright. He's blameless. He loves God. He fears God. Okay, good. He's a moral and holy man. Got it. What's next? He's got a bunch of sheep, he's got a bunch of camel, he's got oxen, he's got female donkeys, and many servants. Okay, so not only is he blameless, good, God-fearing man, we get it, he's moral. Also, he's extremely wealthy. He has a beautiful life for this time period and where he was. He had it as good as you could possibly have it. He had no complaints about life. He had it made. So this man was the greatest of all the people of the East, it says, finishing in verse 3. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings, according to the number of them. So for how many there were, that's what he would offer. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus, Job did continually, doing the burnt offerings. So Job, being the pious man that he was was obviously troubled about his children and the potential of their holiness being smudged, losing it, them cursing God in their hearts. He was concerned about this. So burnt offerings were a part of Israel prior to law and also after law. So Exodus 29, Leviticus 1, part of the law, but also prior to, being from Genesis 8, Genesis 22, and Exodus 10, just as a side note. So these things were custom before as well as after the law. So before it became a part of the law, because it was included in the law, and then after, obviously, when it became included as a part of the written law, then these things became something you had to do. But it's a good example that they were happening prior to that. And curse God in their hearts. So he's concerned about the kids. I wanted to read this real quick, because this was interesting. It says, in ancient Israelite thought, the heart was considered the center of a person's character and primarily represented their cognitive abilities. I thought that was interestingly worded. The people of Israel were commanded to love Yahweh with all their hearts, from Deuteronomy 6 and Psalm 9. But I just thought that was interesting. The center of a person's character and primarily represented their cognitive abilities, which makes sense too, if you think about it, aggregated across other texts in the Old Testament. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything important. I see camels and donkeys, so I'm going to go with no. We're probably good. The church began when the first commandment in the garden was given. Oh, I don't know about that, but now I feel like I missed something. If it's important, I'll come back. Satan allowed to test Job. So now we have the character developed. We know who Job is. We know he's very wealthy. We know he has a family who he loves. We know his family is even perfect, because he has the 7-3 ratio that is then described later in Job as the ideal family. Perfect family, perfect man, perfect life. Character officially developed. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And this is where things get weird, and this is where I'm going to really try to not go down a rabbit hole, because it's something that aggravates me greatly on a personal level. The Hebrew phrase that was used for the sons of God, it's B'nai Elohim, which is the rabbit hole I'm not going to go down, but here is meant to be rendered as sons of God, which it is, which is good, in reference to spiritual beings who, in this scenario, are a part of God's council, the divine council, which I don't remember why, but we were talking about it recently. Like really recently, like last week at some point. For this reason, some translators render the phrase B'nai Elohim here and elsewhere as angels. And without going down the rabbit hole, especially if you've done any bit of Enoch with us, but if you were here for Genesis, we've seen the sons of God be used in a different context. Same term, very different context, wildly different context, almost antithetical in meaning. So just for our purposes here, and for me to shut up and not dive into the depths of this out of pure personal frustration, is the sons of God here are a part of God's council. So these are, which is why some translations will render it angel and not sons of God, because sons of God becomes confusing for anybody who has read the Bible deeply. They get very confused and frustrated about it. So here we're talking about angels, divine council. These are the way I used to preach this was like, you imagine God at a conference room table, and he's surrounded by his co-workers, all angels, and then Satan walks into the conference room and sits at the other side of the table. So you have God, you have this heavenly council, and then you have Satan sitting across from the table here in one moment. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down it, just frolicking around." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" A couple things here. In other places, when Satan is talking, going to and fro, from walking up and down on it, In other places, the same terms in Hebrew are applied to somebody looking for something. So like searching for something, not just wandering around. The way that it's described in English kind of just seems like he's wandering around, like aimless, not really doing anything. In other places, it's used very specifically for somebody who is in search of something, which makes a lot more sense contextually. If this said, I've been in search of something, walking up and down the earth, and then the Lord said, well, have you considered my servant Job? The insinuation is then like Satan was looking for somebody to mess with, essentially, in a very simple way. The image of Satan, the figure wandering around the earth looking for someone to accuse, which is what Satan does, because Satan is not the pitchfork and the devil, and like that's all makes no sense and also isn't true. It's the accuser. So if he's wandering in search of someone to accuse of something, and then this is what the entire story ends up being about. Okay, I'll come back to that. Good angels, bad angels. Good Ben Elohim, bad Elohim. Priceless Naga wisdom. Good thing we're guided by ancient Naga. The first day of the week, oh no. The first day of the week, this refers to Sunday, the day after the Jewish Sabbath. It is significant as the day of Jesus' resurrection, which is why Christians traditionally worship on Sunday. Right, I get the religious context. I just mean as like a working man in that context. I don't like it. I don't like it. It just frustrates me. Chanson, if you see this, I brought you up on the stage in Discord. You just have to approve. Oh, cool. I don't think I've met that person. I also did it just in case.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Isn't Chanson one of your Instagram followers?
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
We verified him.
Did we? Then I just need to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
Has he been around, like, talking? I haven't seen him. He's gone.
No, but he's definitely verified.
Okay. Then probably. I just probably don't recognize the name if he hasn't been around a lot. By the way, I did go to church this Sunday. Well, that's good. That's always a positive thing. Yes, because we all are on the Roman calendar now. Under Rome. Mikkel, what about the ancient serpent in Eden? This ought to be good. I assume that's going to be a good one. Okay, so Satan's wandering around. God's like, well, have you thought of Jacob? I'm sorry, not Jacob, Job. He is perfect. He's not like any other, blameless, upright man. He fears me and he turns away from evil. What about him? Satan answers the Lord and says, did Job fear God for no reason? Which is it's an accusation in and of itself. Does Job fear God for no reason? He's essentially saying, Job has every reason to fear you. And again, fear is not scary fear. Fear is respect. Fear is respect. So does Job not respect you for a good reason? Do you not give him everything? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. So he's doing what he does, and here comes the accusation. The question of the source of why Job is the way he is what is now at stake. It's what's being accused. Is it because he's blessed? Is it because he does what he's supposed to do? Is it because of his spiritual foundation? Or is it because of something else? So Satan is trying to now accuse Job that the fearing of God is simply because of what he has. Because of all that God does for him, that is why Job does what he does. And so now they have to prove that he's wrong. He will curse you to your face. I wanted to read this. It says here in Job 1:5, 2:5, and 2:9, because it'll be the same phrase. The Hebrew text actually uses the word for bless. And this gets kind of confusing. So bear with me. The word is barak, not curse. We in English get he will curse you to your face. The Hebrew term is bless. And actually, let me pull this up. Stretch out your hand and touch your Here you go. So in Strong's, if you wanted to look at it, it's 1288. But in Hebrew, curse would say bless. The wording is, it's using a term that is the opposite of its actual meaning. The use avoids having a biblical text explicitly say curse God in Hebrew, which is legitimate if you look into it. And it's not the only time something like this happens. But the word that is the opposite gets used so that they literally avoid putting curse God explicitly in the Bible. The dual usage of Barak, however, adds a layer of irony to the exchange, since in verse 21 later, Job actually does bless God. He gives a blessing to Yahweh after he does his spiel that becomes kind of a trope later. Even though he had lost all of his wealth, he blesses God later, using the same term here that is now being translated in English as curse. Confusing, but it's just something to be aware of if you care. That in the Hebrew that would say,
Hey, Joe,
yes.
could you put the YouTube back up? It's on Discord.
Thank you, yes. 12. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So the first time now that he's going out on his own. It's the one that people get really upset about, where God is seemingly giving Satan free reign to do whatever he wants. Almost worse, it's like permission. And this starts a lot of theological arguments. So if we want to go into any of it, we can. But the Lord gives Satan permission in this story. Behold, all that he has is in your hands. You can do anything you want, only do not stretch your hand out to him. Do not physically hurt him, which doesn't last. All that he has, though, God is... No, we'll come back to that. All right, so Satan takes Job's property and children. The first issue, all that he has is in your hands, do not hurt him. Do not hurt him. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So one of these guys got away to be able to go tell Job what happened. While he was yet speaking, there came another servant and said, the fire of God fell. This is often translated, this is often interpreted, not translated. It's often interpreted as lightning. The fire fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So we get another servant who made it through just so long as he could tell Job that everybody else died. While he was yet speaking, there came another servant who said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down their servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Same deal, different event, different group of people, all under Job's family, all under Job's care, all of Job's stuff, living stuff. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And guess what? I alone have escaped to tell you. And that is the last one. So one person from each group of what Job loves, the people and animals that Job loves, one person comes one by one to let him know everybody is dead. Then Job arose and tore his robes and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. We've talked about it 1,000 times, but in case you don't know, very, very common way of expressing grieving in the ancient Near East. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And that is what I was referring to a minute ago with the Hebrew term that we use for curse in verse 11 is actually the same term used here for bless. They just don't want to put curse next to Yahweh in the Bible, which is very interesting. But same term. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So character development wise, we have the beautiful, wonderful Job, all good, life is wonderful. Satan is wandering around looking for somebody to accuse for some weird reason that goes very deep theologically, so we don't have to talk about it unless somebody wants to. For some weird reason, God ends up having a meeting with Satan and with the angelic council to be polite about it. And God gives Satan permission to essentially destroy Job's life. He's just not allowed to hurt him. You can't physically do anything to Job. You can do anything else, though. And so this is where we sit. And in doing all of that, Job is still staying true to his faith. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He blesses Yahweh. After all of this happens, he blesses Yahweh. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with any wrongdoing. He's standing by the way that God described him to be, which was steadfast in his faith. Satan is the first troll. Interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. Chapter 2. Satan attacks Job's health. So this is where the tables get turned a bit. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came along to them. Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. Man. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro, from walking up and down on the earth." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" It's literally identical to chapter 1, in case you didn't catch it. He still holds fast his integrity. Now it's shifting, playing off of chapter 1. "Although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin." This is interesting because I've never heard anything confident on this. The best I've heard is that this is some kind of playoff of eye for an eye, which makes sense. I just find it interesting because it seems like a textual inconsistency, and I wonder where exactly it came from. But skin for skin, all that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and flesh, and he will curse you to your face. So last time, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot put a hand on him. This time, Satan is saying, well, you need to stretch out your hand, and you need to touch his bone and flesh, because then he will curse you. Skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give for his life. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life." So now what you have on a deeper level is you have Satan negotiating with God, and in a sense, winning, because a negotiation starts low and becomes more intense until one person gets more of what they want than the other. And that's, in a sense, what is happening. First, God said, no, you can mess up his life, but you cannot touch him. This time, God's like, all right, you can touch him, but don't kill him. So we have a negotiation going on. The scene reminds me of the scene in V for Vendetta when Evie gets thrown in the dungeon. I don't know if I've ever seen that movie. Being the uncultured person that I am, especially after hearing about it for many, many, many years. I don't know why I've never watched it.
You gotta watch it, man. That scene is really important. It's a Job scene.
Okay, Kat, if you're still listening, remind me. I don't work tomorrow, so maybe we can watch it tomorrow. I got it, yeah. All right, I'll try to remember this too. When Evie gets thrown in the dungeon. Okay, mental note taken. Alrighty, so only spare his life. Only spare his life. Last time, don't touch him. This time, touch him, don't kill him. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. The Hebrew word used here is the same used to describe the sixth plague on Egypt in Exodus 9. So just interesting, contextually, because if I remember correctly, we get more of a description in Exodus 9 on the function of the swords. You get more, it's more visual, I guess. You can visualize it better because there's more descriptive terms. Here you don't get that. So if you read Exodus 9, 9, and 10, same thing, same word used. So you get a little bit more of an understanding of what was actually happening to Job. A single sore also afflicted King Hezekiah, in 2 Kings 20, the term can refer to a variety of illnesses. Scripture includes examples of sores that would heal, Leviticus 13:18, and sores that would not heal, Deuteronomy 28 and 27. And it is interesting if you read through any of that. So he's got these sores, and he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes, which is not great. The sat in the ashes thing too is kind of interesting. So in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Jonah, the same term expression gets used, sometimes as a sign of mourning, which is interesting. It can also indicate that Job is now an outcast socially, and therefore is sitting in a trash heap outside the city. I don't like that one as much, because I feel like the other times this term or terminology gets brought up, it does seem to be connected to mourning more, and contextually it makes more sense. I don't think we have any reason to believe that Job is for some reason now sitting in a trash heap outside of the city. We don't have any reason to believe that. We do have every reason to believe that he's mourning. So to me, that makes a lot more sense, but just kind of interesting. So he sat in the midst of the ashes. It's a way of expressing that. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die, Job." Some of the most savage words written in the Bible from a woman, namely a wife, to her husband. Curse God and die, Job. There's a lot of interpretations here, but I want to read this one. Job's wife speaks only here. She is mentioned one other time in Job 19. While her exclamation that Job should curse God reflects that the Satan figure, the prediction is going through. She acknowledges Job's integrity, which is good, using the same language, interestingly, that God used in the beginning in verse 3. So the same way God described him, she describes him, which is good. Good track so far. Are you still persisting in your blamelessness? Are you still holding fast to your integrity, depending on translation? This is an exact repetition of the phrase that God used to describe Job in verse 6. Curse God and die, Job. This is somebody's comments on it, not mine. May reflect her desire to see her husband's misery end. I think that's a very positive outlook on what she's saying. Job himself wished for death later, so that hasn't happened yet. She instructs Job to curse God, perhaps thinking it will lead God to kill Job and end his misery. I think these are very hopeful interpretations. Maybe true. I think it's a stretch, personally. His wife seems like she's not on the right track right now. But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips, which is just adding to the point of God defending him. God said a thing about Job. Job has continually, thus far, proven God right in the face of Satan. Everything Satan thinks has so far been wrong. Job has been a great business card for God. He has represented God properly, very, very well. He's stood by everything. He's held fast to his integrity. He will not curse God and die, bitter, foolish woman. He is going to hold fast for now. One thing here. You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. We've talked about this before, but in Hebrew, the term for fool, naval, it's not just like stupid. It's not just what I assume most of us would picture when we think of fool. It also is in reference to immorality. So other places in the Old Testament, it's used in a moral context. We don't use it much in English today as a moral, like, descriptor. Fool is like a goof. Fool is somebody who's intellectually not with it. Fool then could be that, but fool then also could be somebody who is behaving immorally. So it adds even more to it, especially within the direct context there. Her telling him to curse God and just die. Now, Job's three friends. Job is the ultimate badass. That is a valid description. Listening loves scriptural readings out loud. Oh, Heidi's French. I forgot. Heidi, I remember that you're French. You should be impressed. I don't remember a lot. It takes me a lot of weeks to normally remember things. You should feel very special. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place. Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad, and Shuhite. Shuhite and Zophar, the... I don't know how to pronounce this one here. Ghost, you know... Namathite? Is it Namathite? I'm so terrible with
pronunciation. Lost. What verse?
It's 11. Very end of 11. Last word of 11.
Namatite?
Right? It's Namatite. Okay.
Tight, yeah. It's not thite or tight. It's like an in-between thing that we don't pronounce in English.
Okay.
But it's sense. Like tight. Just say tight.
Yeah. Our English would be Namatite. Okay. It appears to me to be in vain, daring boldness for a worm man to assert that the seventh day is not the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. Oh, I definitely missed something. Graves. Good to see you, sir. I'm super late. Boss came by and had to talk with her. Not a good excuse, man. Never a good excuse. All right, so all his friends are coming. All his friends for now. They made an appointment together. Oh, actually, no, I wanted to read this. Hold on. So, the Temanite, a city in Edom associated with wisdom. Interesting if you care. There's a reference in Jeremiah 49:7 where this location is talked about, and it's the only place that I'm aware of where we're able to geographically link it to something, to anything. Because so many of the locations in the Old Testament are just poof, turn into nothing, because we have nothing to base them off of. Bildad, we'll come back to. Shuhite. The Bildad comes from a distant but unknown location. The term Shuhite may suggest a connection with Shua, one of the sons of Abraham, and Keturah from Genesis 25. And then Namatite. Zophar is from Naamah, whose location is unknown. Naamah is listed as a female descendant of Cain in Genesis 4, which says Zillah also bore Tubal Cain. He was the foreigner of all instruments of bronze and iron, the sister of Tubal Cain and Naamah. It's the only other reference that I'm aware of, and I think the connection is loose, but it's there. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort him, friends coming around Job. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. They raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards the heaven. Again, just weird mourning. Weird to us, mourning. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights. Customary, very normal. You read that all across the Old Testament for mourning, 7 days, 7 nights. And no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. This was probably because they were mourning, and you weren't to speak during mourning. Job laments his birth. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. This is when Job takes a turn. So far, for the most part, Job has held very strong. He's held fast to everything. He's yet to be negative. He's yet to talk down. He's yet to curse anything really at all. This is where we go over the edge a tiny bit. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Leviathan, scary sea monster. I want to talk about this at some point, but not tonight. We'll come back to Leviathan, though, at some point. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light, but have none. Nor see the eyelids of the morning, because it did not shut the doors on my mother's womb. Poetically beautiful, if you think about it, but also wildly sad. Nor hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me? Or why did the breast that I should nurse? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept. Then I would have been at rest. Sleep is obviously reference to death in a lot of the Old Testament and definitely the New Testament. With kings and counselors of the earth who rebuilt ruins for themselves. Or with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden, stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners are at ease together. They hear not the voice of the taskmaster. The small and great are there, and the slave is free from his master. This is the great equalizer as death. The small and the great, the slave is free from the master. Death being the great equalizer. Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden? From God has hedged, whom God has hedged it. For my sighing comes instead of my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. Terribly, terribly depressing. The hidden treasures. It's the extension of the metaphor of darkness and death to hiddenness, and introduces the theme that takes on a greater weight later in the story in 28. This becomes a theme, this hiddenness, the hidden treasure. Then he said it in 23, why is light given to a man whose way is hidden from God? I'm sorry, I don't have glasses on. I'm sorry, I'm having a real hard time reading today. Whom God has hedged in. Job feels like God has surrounded, and this is a reference to earlier too, but has surrounded him with suffering and nothing but problems. He feels this is God doing it, which he said so much earlier when his wife said, curse God and die, Job. He said, how could we take the good that God gives us without taking the evil as well? So Job attributed and attributes the evil to God. Job is not sitting here like aware that he's being attacked by Satan. We have no reason to believe that. We have every reason to think that Job thinks that God is doing everything that is happening, which is why he's defending God. God can do whatever he wants. Naked I came, naked shall I return. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Curse God and die, Job. No, we can take the good, then we can take the evil too. You foolish woman. Job fully thinks that this is God doing everything to him. So the phrasing here in 23 is it's an ironic twist of the Satan figure's words back in chapter 1, 10, where he accuses God of putting a wall of protection around Job. Satan said, you put a hedge of protection around Job. Remove it. Reach out your hand, and Job will curse you to your face. And so far, he's been wrong. But this is when Job is very quickly turning, and we're losing him. So next week, we have the friends coming in, being awful friends, terrible friends. And then we'll do 5 and we'll do 6. So we'll do another 3 next week. I'd say it doesn't have essence, but it definitely has characteristics, if that makes sense. Oh, what did I miss? Does darkness have essence? Oh, we've had this conversation before. Definitely has characteristics. We're all worms of the earth. Where did the worm thing come from? Fun fact, Tubal Cain is an important figure within Freemasonry. I did not know that. Why is that?
It's a secret.
Okay, I kind of
No,
figured.
it's basically just artificing, building with different materials and such. He's a metaphor
Really interesting.
for the craftsman, I guess.
Huh. Yeah, I did not know that. Interesting. You learn something new every day. It makes sense, I
Lots of
guess.
building metaphors.
I mean, that makes sense for sure. Yeah. Huh. Is there another very obvious one that you can think of right now? Just out of curiosity.
Like people.
Yeah.
Hiram Abiff. I
Same.
don't want to get too into it, but
No,
yeah,
no, you're fine.
Hiram Abiff.
Okay. Interesting. I know very, very little. So it's always interesting.
And a bunch of biblical patriarchs and whatnot. John the Baptist, John the Revelator are very revered.
That makes sense too, I guess. Yeah. I should learn more. That's one thing. Like even Kat has got on me about. I don't know much about it.
Only so much time in a day, man.
Yeah, that's the truth right there. If it has characteristics, it has essence, question mark. Is darkness nothing? Question mark.
I think darkness is the absence of God. Like cold is the absence of heat.
Yeah.
I like Pureblood's questions. Maybe I can talk with him a little bit on Discord.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's there now. I know he said he was new to Discord though, so he's working through the technical weirdness of it. But yeah, he's got good stuff. Ever since whatever 2 streams ago, it's been good stuff. It's a good question. It's a hard question. It's hard, but it's also not. Like it seems very simple as well. And we've had it before for sure. But the absence, I think is the
I think
best you
darkness
got.
is a garden without a trellis. Everything grows. Some things grow with a structure, and some things grow wild.
That's a good way to put it.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Do you view evil the same way then? Is evil the absence of God?
Yeah, that's what I think evil is, because everything grows. So like everyone's going to have an ideology, everyone's going to have a motivating factor. You can either kind of mix that or marry that with God's will or your own will, which is a garden without a trellis.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's the best way I can visualize it. I mean, who knows, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's simple. It's simple enough to get it, but it conveys the complexity of it, I think, the best you can without going down into the depths. Essence equals the chairness of a chair. That's essence, says Mikkel. That's a great way to put it too. Chair may be made from wood or metal or plastic, but a chair is a chair. I like that.
Yeah, this gets back into like the forms, like what are forms and stuff like that, and Greek philosophy.
Yep. Yeah, which reminds me, we on Tuesday are gonna do some Marcion stuff. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be good. It's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be good. I'm trying to do like a life story, like from the best that we have, life story, and I'm trying to also do it from like the perspective of absolute objectivity, because I have very, very biased opinions. So I'm being very careful to not have that approach.
I honestly don't have really any opinions, so I guess that's the best way to come in.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully if you see inconsistencies, you can call them out. because I just it's really really tough with like Marcion and with the Gnosticism stuff and everything like that, because a lot of it just doesn't survive, and so what survived is from detractors, and it's really tough trying to decide excuse me, what is valid and what is not valid. And Marcion's very, very similar. They hated Marcion. All of the big names, the Origins, the Arrheniuses, they all hated him. And yet most of what we have is from them. Luckily, we have more for Marcion than we do about the Gnostics, because the Gnostic text and everything was destroyed in wild fashion. But Marcion, we have some. Be yourself, Joe. We
Now,
got your back.
do they ever get into why they hated him, or was it just like we hate you, and then
Oh yeah. No,
they just move on?
in depth. You can read volumes and volumes that are available today, because they're surviving theologians. You can find all kinds of work from them, and it's crazy interesting. And you can find a lot of them talking about Gnosticism and Marcion, because that's all we have. All we have is them talking shit about it. It's them explaining in great detail why they hate them. The problem is that like what then has been found outside of the detractors does not agree with what the detractors said. So now you're in this position where you have not real numbers, but you have 10% Gnostic texts that describe Gnosticism. And then you have 90% from its detractors who describe it in a totally different way, who also hated them and said they had, I can't say it on YouTube. What channel are we on? Yeah, I don't want to say it here. I'll put it in Discord. But said that they were doing wild things, wild adult things that were just like, it's just wild accusations. So it's like, do you believe the 10% that describes something pretty tame, pretty similar to what was going on, just kind of a different take on it? Or do you believe this insane information about those same people because you have 90% of it? You're in a very, very rough position. But yeah, they describe it in great detail. And same with Marcion. There's a lot of information about Marcion. It's just primarily sourced from people who did not like him. And it's all heresy, to answer your question in a very long and annoying way. It's all because it was heresy. Marcion was seen as a heretic. Gnostics were seen as heretics. They were seen as demonic.
I mean, isn't that kind of where all slander comes from? Like, you don't believe like us, so we're going to ruin you.
Yes.
It's pretty wild.
That's
I mean,
why
we don't
it's
even
hard.
know like what happened during 9/11, man, and that was like 25 years ago.
That's right.
So this is what 1900 years ago or so.
Yeah, that's a good example.
This is impossible.
It's impossible. That's the problem. It's absolutely impossible. There are small bits of scholarship that I follow very closely that this is all they do. So there are a number of guys who like the Gnosticism, the Marcion, the whole other kind of side of the early first couple centuries Christianity. They've been studying this for 30 years because it's impossible. It's impossible. But what they've done is really incredible work, and we have so much information now that just did not exist. Like you can read a Marcion New Testament for the most part. You can read it, and it's very interesting. And we just didn't have it for a long time. And then in 1945, with the whole Nag Hammadi library discovery, like that really opened things up too. And luckily, that really opened up kind of a lot of scholars' view of Gnosticism. It broadened it a bit, where they're like, huh. We have more of these Gnostic texts, and they seem pretty tame. They just seem like Christian people who disagreed about this or that with what became, proto-orthodoxy, which I think has helped. And so I think the longer that is out, and maybe if we find some more or something, it'll change. But yeah, it's an impossible task. But Marcion's super interesting either way. So I'm trying to set it up as kind of like a life story, who he was, where he came from, what was his occupation, what was going on in Rome at the time, because you had the big war between the Jews and Rome, and then the fall of Rome, and everything like that was happening at the same time, which adds to kind of Marcion's story and why he did the things he did, and why he ended up with the New Testament that he did, how he was obsessed with Paul. Paul was the only actual apostle worth anything. It's just very interesting, but I'm trying to set it up as like just a story, so it kind of reads like a story. I'm excited though.
Even though we're even though we're so far removed in time, human nature doesn't change. So we can still kind of surmise why they did what they did and why it was a heresy and things like that. So I'm really interested. and seeing what you have.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. I mean, I get it. I understand it. Nothing different would happen today. Like, I don't believe it would be any different today. If what happened then with Marcion and the Gnostics was able to happen today, like if the internet didn't exist and we could just burn books and kill people, no doubt, the larger denominations would do the exact same thing. It's just not possible today.
We have a lot of examples all throughout history, and the Wayback Machine is being tampered with. So I mean, it's even happening now.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Mikkel said, and all the vitriol against Marcion kind of validates him as the and the quality of his heresy. Right. That's what ends up happening that is so interesting is that if they would have just shut up, they could have erased Gnosticism and Marcion. The fact that they would not shut up about them is the only reason we know anything about them. They would have disappeared into nothing. But they just could not shut the hell up. They had to talk about it. They had to write about it. They just had to. And so not only did it become popular again, we got all this information. Because they gave up good things along with the bad things. Like they would explain, that's how, from my understandings, that's how a lot of the scholars have come to the realization about some things that are true about the Gnostics and whatnot, is because these early theologians would explain true things but then embellish them or add negative details. But the fact that they did that at all is the only reason we have the true things. Otherwise, we just wouldn't have it at all. So these guys who hated them and wanted to erase them are the only reason they were not erased. It's kind of ironic. It's like ironic justice, which is a little bit beautiful. Joe, if you ask me, that's a better approach to share Marcion's story. A good call, in my opinion. Well, I'm glad. I just figure it's like, otherwise it's so weird. It's such like scattered data and information, and it's hard to keep track of. Like, wait, what year was that? 130? And then this happened in Rome, and that's why Marcion would have done this. Like, it's impossible to keep up with. It took me years to like firmly grasp a lot of this stuff as like a big picture in my head. But I'm probably just dumb with a lot of that. I have a hard time with timelines. I always have. And the Bible being out of order and being complicated does not help. But I just always had a very tough time, like picturing when was this and where was that. I did want to show this too. I hope you can see it. Yeah, as I say timeline, it reminded me that I wanted to show this. So we're reading the text obviously chronologically, right? So we had Adam and Eve, we had the flood, the Tower of Babel, Job lives and suffers. The reason partially is that the reason the timeline is difficult for the canon is because the books, you'd have to jump from book to book in some cases. Like certain chapters of a book in Genesis, certain chapters of Genesis, then bounce to Job, then bounce back to Genesis for God calling Abraham and making the covenant. I wasn't going to do all that, which is why we just read all of Genesis. Now we're reading Job lives and suffers. Then we'll move on to, see, we already did Israel and Jacob. Then we'll move on to the Exodus, and then we'll just kind of go from there. It gets easier after this. The beginning of the Bible, timeline-wise, is very complicated. But we are still at the beginning. Oh, I just lost it. We are still at the beginning as far as the timeline goes. We've done the Genesis, including God calling Abraham, including Israel, Jacob, and the family in Egypt. Now we're kind of backtracking a bit to do Job, and then we're going to bounce forward to Exodus and then continue on in order of history. Yes, just ignore Marcion. That. Oh, the second century strides into that. That's all they needed to do. Just ignore the bastard. It really is, man. It really is. They shot themselves in the foot so hard. And thank God. Thank God. All right. Anything else, y'all? Otherwise, we'll call it a night. So Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. Oh, I don't think I've done this yet. If you're watching this later, or if you haven't joined Discord yet, we have a Discord. There's a link in the live chat pinned to the top. There's also a link in the description of the video. we do this stuff. So if you like this stuff, then join Discord. If you join Discord, though, and hang out for a bit, you can come on and talk like Ghost was a minute ago. We did game night last night, which was fun. We'll do that as much as we can on Saturdays. Also tossing around doing Saturday stream every week. So that would make it Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. For now, though, at least guaranteed. Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday is what we're already doing. So Tuesday will be the topic discussion, which is Marcion this week. So early Christian history, Marcion, the first compilation of the New Testament. Talk about some of that stuff. Thursday, we'll go back to the Book of Giants / Enoch. And then I'll probably do a Saturday stream. And then we'll probably do game night Saturday for anybody who does want to play. And then next Sunday, we'll be back here doing Job. So if nobody has anything else. Pureblood, it's been good to have you. And Heidi, if you're still here, it was lovely seeing you again. But it looks like you're gone.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'm gonna head out. Thanks everyone for stopping by.
Yeah, have a good night, man. All right, y'all. I'm out. Love you guys. Have a good night. See you Tuesday for the Marcion. The Marcion. Good night. Chanson, send me a message, please. If you can hear me right now. If you're still here, send me a message. I'm trying to link and connect again. You from Instagram. To visualize. I don't like not grasping the names. Nighty night. Thanks, Ruth. Love you guys. Night.